2:47 in the morning, January 12th, Miraflores Palace, Caracas. A Chinook screams in low over the rooftops. Nobody on the ground fires back. Nicolas Maduro is on his knees in his own bedroom, zip-tied, blindfolded, still in his silk pajamas. Down the hall, his wife is screaming into a radio that stopped answering 4 minutes ago. In 9 hours, he lands on American soil. A federal courtroom is waiting. How do you kidnap a sitting president out of his own palace? A palace ringed by Russian S-400 missiles, watched by Cuban intelligence, wired for sound by Chinese engineers, guarded by 50,000 loyal troops. You don't. Not in one night. This started 5 years earlier. One phone call, one betrayal. $50 million. Langley, Virginia, 2020. An encrypted line lights up on a duty officer's desk. The caller is inside Maduro's own security detail, a colonel with a keycard to the president's bunker. He isn't selling secrets for ideology. He's watched the regime fly cocaine through Caribbean airstrips into Miami, watched ministers stack euros in Swiss vaults, while his own salary buys less every year. He's done. His price, $50 million. American citizenship, a name Caracas will never trace. The CIA agrees. They hand him a code name, Ledger, and for 4 years he becomes the most valuable asset south of the equator. Guard rotations, bunker blueprints, the coordinates of a gold reserve, move twice to stay hidden. Then one file changes everything. Ledger reports the president is gravely ill, a condition Caracas has buried for years. Every 6 weeks, he slips out of the country for treatment. Each trip opens a window, just under 40 hours where palace security collapses to almost nothing. That file sits in a drawer for years. Then a new administration takes office, reads it cold, and asks one question: can we actually get him? Yes, but there's a wall. You cannot fly a task force into Venezuelan airspace, not past S-400 batteries, not past Cuban intelligence embedded inside the palace, not past Chinese-built surveillance logging every call in the capital. One leak, and Ledger is dead, and so is the mission. So they build a lie. A routine naval exercise announced weeks ahead, drifting into the Caribbean like it happens every year. Nobody watching believes it's anything else. That's the mistake. The colonel's last message goes out at 9 that night. 4 words, buried inside a routine supply request. The president is not going to Havana. He is staying. The window just opened 40 hours early. On a warship 70 miles north, that message reaches a woman on watch inside a windowless room lit only by screens. She reads it twice. Then she picks up a phone that only rings for one reason. 2 hours later, radar operators in Caracas start blinking at the same dead patch on their screens. A glitch, they think. Somewhere over the water, 12 sites just went silent within the same 9 seconds. Not broken, blinded. Inside the palace, none of this reaches anyone's ears yet. The president is 3 floors up, asleep. His wife is beside him. Down the hall, a night shift that should be 200 strong is barely 40. Half of them are already turning toward the fire lighting the far side of the city. Sirens, a fuel depot burning orange. A story about to reach every camera in Caracas. None of it is true. All of it is working. You want to know the trick? Here it is. While every eye in the capital turns toward the fire, nobody is watching the roof. Rotors cut the dark above Miraflores. No lights, no warning, just weight pressing down on the air, and then boots. The 2 roof guards go down before either reaches a radio. A door that took engineers 6 months to plan around opens in 4 seconds. Down a stairwell, on night vision, 12 men move like they've done this before. Because they have. 157 times, in a replica building nobody in Caracas ever heard of. Outside the bedroom door, 2 more guards never get the chance to raise an alarm. Inside, a man who has not lost a vote or a war in 25 years is asleep in silk pajamas, next to his wife, with 50,000 soldiers sworn to die for him scattered across a city watching the wrong fire. The door blows off its hinges in 3 seconds. He sits up, confused, then furious, then afraid, in that order. He says something about being the president of Venezuela. Nobody stops moving. Hands go under his arms. He's lifted like luggage, not like a head of state, out through smoke and down a stairwell his own architects designed to be unbreachable. His wife is screaming into a radio. Nobody answers. 4 minutes pass before anyone realizes the silence itself is the emergency. On the roof, a harness, a rope, a man who commands an army going up into the dark with his hands bound, kicking at nothing. 2 minutes later, a Venezuelan jet finally scrambles out of Valencia, hunting the shape crossing its coastline. It never gets close enough to fire. A radar warning it can't outrun turns it home before the pilot gets a lock. By the time anyone in the capital understands what just happened, the Chinook carrying the president of Venezuela is already over open water, already untouchable, already gone. Nobody built their defenses for this direction. The S-400s, the Cuban handlers, the Chinese-built listening posts, every one of them aimed outward at an invasion that was never coming. Nobody built a wall for 12 men on a rope. On the ship, they process him like evidence, zip-tied, blindfolded, muttering something that might be a prayer, might be a threat. A medic checks his pulse, fast but steady. He is, for the first time in a quarter century, exactly as powerless as everyone he ever ruled. By sunrise, he's not in Caracas anymore. He's not even in international waters anymore. He's on a plane to a country he spent 2 decades calling his enemy, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of silk. And somewhere back home, a defense minister is on camera calling it an act of war, his voice cracking on the second sentence. Nobody in Moscow moves a ship. Nobody in Beijing moves a plane. They complain to a room full of diplomats who cannot do anything either, and then they wait, because they already know the math. One rescue attempt turns a kidnapping into a war nobody wants, least of all them. 9 hours after a Chinook screamed over his own rooftop, he's fingerprinted in a federal building in Miami. Prisoner number, a string of digits that used to belong to a president. The charges take almost a full minute to read aloud. Narco-terrorism, conspiracy to move thousands of kilos of cocaine through half a hemisphere, money laundering, crimes committed against people who never got a trial of their own. He pleads not guilty. The judge denies bail in under 30 seconds. Of course she does. Where exactly would he go? His last words on the way out of that courtroom call the whole operation illegal, kidnapping, an act of war. Maybe he's right. Maybe none of that matters anymore. Back in Caracas, the sun comes up on a country with no one steering it. Generals who spent years agreeing with each other in public start disagreeing in private. In some neighborhoods, people are in the streets celebrating. In others, they're burning tires and calling it an invasion. Nobody in that city goes to work like it's a normal Tuesday, because it isn't one, and won't be again for a long time. And the man who made all of it possible, the colonel who sold 4 years of his life for $50 million and a name nobody in Venezuela will ever be able to trace, is already somewhere else, under a new identity, watching the same footage on a screen, in a country he'll never go home to either. He didn't win his country its freedom. He bought himself a different kind of exile instead, just a far more comfortable one. Nobody fired the first shot in a war that could have started that night, which means, technically, nobody won one either. But somewhere in Caracas, in a palace with the power still out and the guards still arguing about who was supposed to be watching the roof, that's a distinction that's going to matter less and less with every day this country spends finding out what comes next.